Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is navigating the heavy feelings of love and loss, which is the rites of passage in motherhood. So this comes from a listener's email who wrote in asking us to dive a little bit deeper into the experience of grief.
Yes, she did. So this beautiful listener said, endless gratitude for your podcast and all the wisdom shared. It's been such a guide for parenting, and my go-to when I'm unsteady in something is to search the podcast history. I was looking for a few things today and couldn't see so much. I thought I'd send some ideas, which we love, right? Because we love that people go to like, and there's something that if there's something that's not there for you, like reach out. This beautiful listener asked us, how to integrate grief into your life, how to be with it, specifically grief around fertility, miscarriage, and also just the general grief of life that we experience, like aging parents and grief of the end of babyhood. And we just thought, we probably haven't really talked a lot about this, although for so many mothers, it hangs in the air, doesn't it? This, through motherhood, it brings to such crystal focus the passage of time and our own mortality, and just that sense of needing to soak it up at the same time as grapple with our own overwhelm or grapple with our feelings of just wanting solitude, even in the face of babyhood rapidly leaving our world.
Yeah. I mean, it's massive, right? And we just want to say that not all of us will identify with the word grief. So we just want to kind of sit with the word grief a little bit more, being that you don't only experience grief at a tragic loss. You also experience, flavors of grief when we're asked to let go and we don't want to, or we don't feel ready, when an identity is kind of crumbling around us and we're struggling to work out who we are anymore, when we feel lost in life or in motherhood, when we don't want to let go of, that stage that has been, or the dream that we had, or the way that it was supposed to play out. Whenever we feel that almost disappointment that asks us to let go of something that we had held onto or dreamed about or wished about or longed for or loved, that's a type of grief.
Yeah. It's an identity grief in many ways. And I think there's so much value in us giving presence to this, because we're certainly socialized, and I recognize I've done this many times. I should just be grateful, or I should just look at all that I have. And what that does is it tells us it's not worthy or safe or even okay to experience what we're experiencing, that we should somehow be better than this, which doesn't give us an opportunity to really explore the wisdom in it and explore, the pieces of our heart that we get to find in this heaviness.
Yes. So what we want to do is hit you up with our 4 concepts or steps that we perceive answers this listener's question in terms of how do we integrate grief into our own lives? How do we let that be part of our lived experience and let it change us in a way that feels really aligned and beautiful, rather than feeling like we're held back or we're somehow shutting down pieces of ourselves? How do we actually integrate it as part of our human and mother experience? So we have 4 steps with that. The first one is allowing your experience.
Mm.
So you have to allow it first, right? You have to have a framework in your own mind that says this is part of my experience and it has meaning and it has purpose.
Mm.
It's not this random experience that I'm being sideswept by and is somehow in the way.
Mm.
That this is part of an experience of what is happening for me, and it gives me tools and insights and ways of healing and moving forwards when I choose to see it that way. So grief is a part of the rite of passage. A rite of passage has many parts that end in the integration of a new identity. The first part that any of us will go through when we're going through a rite of passage is grief.
Yeah.
Grief of, like we did in last week's podcast, when you heard me, completely melt down about losing. No, I'm not losing. How about I own that? In removing my womb and letting go of the identity that I have with that, there's a grief first of the separation. There's a grief of what you have always known that can no longer be. There's a grief of letting go of what has been safe and no longer is. So we have to remember that whenever we're going through a change, a really pivotal change in our life that almost heralds our next evolution of self, you will find a rite of passage. And the very first thing you will experience will be grief.
Yeah. Yes. But in not willing to allow it, then we actually don't then say yes to the transformation that's possible on the other side of it either. We kind of live in this wishy-washy place of numbness if we can't allow it.
Right, exactly. So first off, we have to be able to just overarch it and go, grief has purpose and place here. It's meaning, and it has meaning in this context of what I'm going through. It is a pathway for me understanding myself deeper. So it's a really beautiful invitation into everything that I'm calling in and that I want. We have to have a level of comfort with grief kind of helping us pull apart and separate the parts that we are letting go of and can leave behind and the parts that we want to carry forward. Grief is just a wonderful invitation into the self. What am I grieving? What is happening here for me? What is present for me here? What am I wanting and ready to let go of? And what am I struggling to, and how can I help myself there? So we have to be with grief first for anything to cathartically move forwards.
And also to accept that, grief has a place even at times of great joy. So, I think back to like my son's 8th birthday, which was really the heralding for him of a rite of passage into, being a boy and a tween, right? And I had this really poignant moment where I was overcome by like a mix of gratitude and grief, I think, which was just like, we're in these golden years where he's still so anchored in the home and with us as a family, and everyone's well, and my parents are here and they're really well, and all of us are just vibing on this beautiful, fun party. But there was even a grief in that, because I know at my core how much motherhood feels like life speeds up. And in that moment of appreciation for this beautiful party that we created and celebrating his birthday, there was also this poignant, like, wow, like this isn't going to be forever. Like this is a moment in time that I'm being asked to deeply just relish and let myself feel the grief of it, of something leaving for something else to come in. Of his early childhood to leave so something else can come in. Of my parents' independence to someday leave.
Yeah.
Right? And then something else to come in.
I really love that you said, this really beautiful mix of grief and gratitude, because I actually often think that they go together, like that balance of pleasure and pain and challenge and support, grief and gratitude kind of sit together too, that when you're really in the preciousness of the moment, there can also be this equal edge of, and this will never be again.
Yeah.
Like it's so beautiful.
But it takes you deeper into a moment when you're offered that perspective.
When you're willing to acknowledge the grief, because you can therefore almost recognize how precious the precious is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really love that you said that. And I think all of us recognize grief and gratitude in many moments, right? Like you can have your baby and you're full of gratitude and you're full of grief. And you can get married and you're full of gratitude and you're full of grief.
Which I didn't understand when I got married, that would be present, and judge that as, oh gosh, is this not the right thing? Because of course, all of the ways in which marriage is represented in our culture is like happily ever after, like you've met the one, and you just go, like, there's no exploration of the complexity of the transition that is
the identity.
The identity, right? So in not understanding that as healthful and normal part of our human development, and instead something to pathologize, we pathologize ourselves and take ourselves and numb ourselves or take ourselves out of that experience. So I love that we're talking about like allowing it.
Yeah, me too. So number one has to be to allow and understand the process of grief as being something that is supportive rather than something that is in the way for you. Number two is to ritualize your experience. So all we mean by that is create some sovereignty around it, create some ritual that allows you to anchor into it and create a physical space in which you can emotionally and mentally process the unseen, right? When we create ritual, we're offering ourselves the ability to move through something and make the unseen seeable or the unknown knowable. It's this beautiful way of just giving ourselves a structure so that our psyche can reconcile what is happening.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of ritualizing what we're grieving. So whether that's a women's circle for you, whether that's a cup of tea and a candle and burning what you want to let go of, or, you know, planting some seeds and lighting what you're looking forward to, or planting a tree in reverence of who you've been, or, you know, sharing a cup of tea with your favorite tree in your house. And, you know, as you throw out, you know, the last bits of your tea leaves, just really recognizing what you're letting go of, or journaling, or meditating, or moving your body, or, you know, like, how do you create a sense of how do I make this moment and honor what I'm going through in a slower, more integrated way? Number three is support your body to be with the intensity.
Yeah. And so this, I would suggest, looks like, you know, moving toward the feelings and creating a structure a little bit like ritual, or you're suggesting with ritual, where we're creating a safe structure for us to feel into it and not completely collapse under it. So how can I, you know, tap into a playlist that's going to allow me to move this through my body? How can I find like or tap into that perfect friend or family member who I know can safely hold me while I let this bubble up and out of me without judgment?
Totally. And what else might your body need for support? I mean, you and I talk about our well-being pillars all of the time, to be with the intensity of what you're being asked to go through. Because often I think if we're, you know, visibly sick or we have a broken arm or something, we go, yeah, well, of course you need more rest, more support, more hydration, more help, more whatever. But when you're going through something like an invisible identity shift, it's really hard to feel like you're just as worthy of those things, but you really do need to support your body in the same way, because the unseen changes, I think, are often the biggest changes that you'll ever make in your life.
Yeah.
But the biggest changes you'll ever make as a woman will not be the seeable ones. They'll be the unseen ones.
Yeah, and they only become seen after you've gone through them.
Right.
But how transformed you come out on the other side is kind of almost directly correlated to how much you've allowed yourself the process and supported yourself through that process. I know I've never actually quite found the body worker for me, but I've often, when I've been in these places, just had this sense of I need like a massage where I can just go and be touched and cry on the table.
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of body work where it touches the emotion, and that practitioner is so beautiful at both their craft, but also the space that they hold, that you feel safe enough to let go in that space.
Totally, 100%. So what support structures does your physical body need in order to give you the energy to do the inner unseen transformations that it's seeking? Number 4 is share the grief. Like we share on the podcast or we share with a friend, just being willing, instead of trying to hide this thing like it's shameful, being like, here's what I'm struggling with. And you will find all of these humans around you that go, yeah, I get that. Or yeah, I went through that too. Or gee, I see myself in that as well. And just feeling the connectedness of the web that you're part of and how the same you are rather than how different you are can feel incredibly healing while you're going through something like an identity crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like that piece, that community piece makes it, makes you feel whether it's something that you can walk yourself through versus something that, you might be swallowed up by.
Yeah. And one of the things when we had talked about this, Bridgie, that you had said was don't give up finding where it can be held.
Yeah. So I certainly know, like when I was having experiences of secondary infertility, like I would, it would be like I would see, like my mother's group all kind of had their second child like earlier than I did. And, yet another baby announcement would put me into tears, like a puddle of tears. But my husband couldn't really identify with it. He wasn't as at all really like in the place I was. So because he wasn't as good then as he is now at holding space, he minimized my experience and just couldn't really hear it. And I remember feeling so crushingly isolated in that moment, but also like knowing enough to know, and I know like this needs honoring. And so finding where that can be honored, even if it can't be where you think it should be, right? Like in your intimate relationship or somebody else who you would otherwise trust, is to look for where it can be held.
Yeah. And don't give up, because there is people, spaces and places. So don't give up. We're just jumping in to let you know what is happening in the worlds of bridgetwood.life and julietenner.love in case there's a little opening for you to jump in and expand your life a little bit deeper. So what's happening in your world, Bridge?
It's Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound. So it is a 4-module course supported by integration calls and a women's circle to really help you reveal the ways in which the mother wound is impacting your life right now and your parenting, and provide you more freedom and spaciousness in your mothering journey. And you, Jules?
Is Queen School. So Queen School is now an online course with 4 full modules that you are self-paced and work your way through, combined with 12 months of really stretching that out as I help you really integrate, embody, and move through the blocks so that you can literally become Queen School in your life. So Queen School is all about connection, pleasure, sensuality, magnetic communication, feminine energy, and embodiment with me over now a beautifully integrated 12-month experience. So you can find out more at julietenner.love. So maybe we talk specifics around how we integrate grief into our lives around fertility and miscarriage.
Yeah, it just takes me back. Like, so it's such a big, so I certainly was like, yeah, once our baby turns 12 months, like we're going to start trying for another. Anyway, I didn't get a period for 2.5 years. And so all through that journey was like this sense of like, is this ever going to happen again? And I'm yearning so much for this thing, and all I feel is its absence. And how can I both love where I'm at and balance out that yearning for where I want to be without that yearning taking me completely out of the present? And so for me, it was having the supports to do what I felt like I could do, which was have the acupuncture and, do the lifestyle things that I thought might support bringing my period back. But to also really look for other ways that my spirit could be nourished and I don't know, buoyed, right? Like, could my rite of passage or could my expansion be a different form to the way that I'm trying to shoehorn it into right now, which is in the form of this second child, for example, or is in the form of this baby that was supposed to be here now in the case of a miscarriage. And so in those times, it was things like, in what ways is my fertility present? Where can I explore all of the ways in which it is to balance out where it's not for me right now? So in the infertility journey, it can look like it's constantly not working, but where am I fertile? Where am I expanded? Where am I alive? Where is my body functioning? And in the case of miscarriage, it's like, what other frontiers are there for me to explore that allow me to birth parts of myself if I'm not birthing this baby that I yearned for? And so in that case, we traveled to Europe. And so allowing the grief, but also looking for the support so that we don't become so blinkered by that which we perceive we've lost.
Because where there's loss, there's gain.
Yeah. But it can feel so deeply painful when all we're occupied by is the loss.
And I'd also say we have done a number of podcasts on, Bridget's done a few on infertility, and we've done a few on both our miscarriage experiences. And I think, did we do the podcast with Shelley and Katie too? Or was that in like a Nourishing the Mother?
Yeah, we did. No, we did a podcast on Shelley and Katie. And if this, I really want to say too, like, if you're a mother who is living this right now, I don't want in any way for our words to sound at all nonchalant or dismissive, because that's absolutely not our intention, because I can so put myself back to that ache of like seeing a pregnant woman or, like considering the date that I was supposed to have this baby. But with the passage of time comes wisdom, and sometimes wisdom can land in ways that can feel
jarring.
Yeah, because I'm talking about experiences now that were 10 years ago or 7 years ago, and so with the wisdom over that time I can speak with much less emotion. But that doesn't take away from me the pain of the very visceral sense of what living that was like. And so I really want to honor like that if you feel like you're drowning in that, like, I see you.
Yeah. I really love that you said that. Then there's the grief of endings, like the end of childhood, the end of babyhood, the end of toddlerhood, the end of the fertility season, whatever it is for you. There's all these micro, and you shared the kind of that 8-year-old cusp, that realization that childhood is ending and a new phase is beginning. How do we integrate the grief of those endings into our life?
Just allow it. Like, even I think some others' favorite things I think are to like look at old photos and just cry, or like look at photos, listen to music and cry, or read poetry and cry. Like, that's one of my favorite things. Like, I created a reel the other day with some poetry by a writer, and it was all about like, that the nuance in those endings. I can get emotional thinking about it now, but that's like, we need to feel that, right? Like, we need to feel the ache of that so we can be present to the joy and the magic of our children.
Yeah.
So whatever it is for you, like if it's writing, if it's looking at those photos, but not looking at them going, oh no, I shouldn't have yelled at them today, or oh no, I've got to be better tomorrow. Looking at them and just feeling like the wave of love, right? Where you're present to it. As soon as there's all the noise in your head, you're not even present to it. So to just let the feelings be and the reverence for it be. Because it makes it so much more juicy when you're with them, right?
Yeah, it's really true. It's really true. I love that. I do. I don't know if I've got anything else to add to it. Other than exactly what you're saying, I just really let myself have pockets of time where I can honor that grief that I'm feeling and be like, I'm really sad to miss this bit.
Yeah.
And I do share that stuff with my kids. Like every year on their birthday, I tell them their birth story.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
You know, and, you know, they have these moments where they're just, it's such a perfect moment, not because it's anything extraordinary, but because it's completely ordinary. And I'm just floored by how much grace and perfection is in this moment. I share that with them. Like my son will often go, why are you staring at me? It's so beautiful right now, you know, and you just let yourself share that. And there's love in that. There's the remembrance of just how beautiful this life is that you're creating. Yeah. Because you do collect those moments that you spend time macerating in. Like I do think that's what endings give us the permission to do, is slow down time. Yeah. Like you think about any ending and you're like, gee, I wish I could go back, because if I went back, I'd just spend longer gazing at my baby while it breastfed, watching them while they played, sitting and having a cup of tea with that parent. Like it's in the absolute ordinariness that we wish to string out time in reflection of those endings. So I love the opportunity that endings give us, as you're saying, is to string out time and just hang a little longer, because the longer you hang there and the more vivid you can make that memory, the more it kind of stays like a pearl on your necklace of memories when you look over your life. Yeah. You try and rush through it, it's probably hard to remember.
Well, you're not really, it's like you're not as there as much, right? You're not in your body, so you don't get to like craft that beautiful cellular memory of it because you're just moving through it so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think writing as well, writing stories about how you've loved this phase of life with them, and write to each child in their own book or letter or whatever it is for you, what you loved about them as a baby, what you're going to miss and what you look forward to, what you loved about them as a toddler and what you're going to miss and what you're going to look forward to. Of course, I would tend to pepper that with also how fucking hard it was and what an asshole they were. But, you know, also you could just do that.
Do you do that? I know, because you and I both got these school books, like we do your kids' school, but do you keep this separate to that?
Yeah, I do have that separate. Yeah. So I do have the, you know, their school years kind of thing, but I have a separate book for each of them that I just write in randomly when they've said funny things or, you know, stuff has happened, and I just kind of document a little bit of that space and time.
It's beautiful.
So, and I do, you know, I do document the stuff that is less than shiny too, because it is also beautiful. It also makes me smile as I remember it. And it also makes me not so nostalgically hold on to that rose-colored glasses version of that life.
That's true too. That's helpful, because that's what when we're like longing for something, we're often longing for what the part that we infatuated with. We're not longing for like that like furiously frustrating part of them.
Yeah, we right, when we're stuck in nostalgia, we have completely wiped out of our memory bank all of the shit that was fucking brutal. Yeah, that equilibrated the joy and the love. Yes. They are both present.
Yes,
one version of life is not better than another version of life. They're just two different shit shows.
Yeah,
so don't forget, as you're being nostalgic, to remember the shit show. What do you perceive is missing? Where was that present? Where is that present now?
Yeah, it's such a great reminder.
I do really like to just remember that with, you know, a little bit of irony. And I do have all of these photos of my kids over the years where they've grown, and I can stand in front of those photos sometimes and get very nostalgic, because every one of those photos I can remember exactly. It's a pearl moment for me, right? Like I can remember exactly that moment. I can put myself there. I can feel the sea breeze on my face. I can hear their laughter. And then I have to remember also how fucking brutal that time was. Oh, you were so perfect. I'm really happy to have that photo on the wall. Off we go.
Yeah. Yeah, again, and that is also a really beautiful way to bring yourself into the present.
Yeah. Because one way is not better than another. Nothing is missing, right? Everything is present. So you've just got to equilibrate your own perceptions and bias in order to be able to feel the immense joy and gratitude, which helps you move forwards rather than feeling like you're tugged by a past that was somehow infinitely better than your present.
Yes.
Because it's not true. So I don't know if that helps you with grief. It was a little bit, more mental, I suppose, but that's certainly how I love to be with it. And then there's the grief of things like aging parents and recognizing how life is shifting.
Yes, I think mothers really face this a lot. Like we really are sandwiched between this beauty of new life and, the all-consuming worlds of our children as they expand their life and grow into their life. And then on the other end, we're, working through our own grief and letting go and complex feelings about our parents as they age, and that where they were the parent, perhaps now you're more of the parent, or how your relationship changes as they age, and you're being asked to care in ways you perhaps haven't cared for them before. And, I'm seeing this with my parents. My dad's caring for his dad, who's in his 90s, who's had an accident. And just the complex feelings of both love, but resentment sometimes, because there's this part of you that's this is my life, that I want to live my way, and that I have this enormous responsibility, and yet I also have these feelings of grief because I know that time is short, and just this to allow yourself to exist in that place of churn as well, with no immediate answers, but just more invitations to soften, I think, as we balance that.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because there's a certain it's almost like a maiden to mother kind of transition, though, isn't it? It's almost like that it's the last phase of that infancy, or that naivety where you were looked after in the world, and now you're being asked to look after the world. It's that raising in responsibility where there's now not that same sense of I'm looked after and there's always somewhere safe for me to go.
Yeah, which can be, for our identity, really wobbly.
Yeah.
If it's built so much on there being, in your parents providing stability and safety and security and all of those things, that to then realize that that's on shaky ground, and therefore where you built that from, or where you resource that from, hopefully you now have the inner resourcing for all of that, so that you can give that where it needs. Yeah, it's big. And my parents are relatively well and young still, but I do think about that, and I think about the ages that my children might be at when my parents are aging more, and what it means for the dance that I have between service and responsibility to family, and then service and expansion of myself.
Right? It's like a whole nother layer of that. Yeah, it totally is. And potentially financial responsibility.
Yeah.
What does it look like to weigh all of that? But I still think the same principles that we spoke about with grief apply here. Is you've got to recognize that what you're grieving is also what has been, or what you've known, or what you had projected forwards, and it's a future that you're now seeing.
It's not going to be that way.
Yeah. So there's a grief about a perceived future that now isn't yours, or there's a grief about what has been. So you still need to be with both of those griefs. So it's still the same process, allowing your experience, seeing this as part of a rite of passage. What is it calling you into? Ritualizing those griefs. So really letting yourself be with them and explore them in a way that feels really nourishing, supporting your body with that level of emotional holding and intensity while you do that, and sharing that grief with others, because you feel a sense of that greater holding when you share it, right? A problem shared is a problem halved. When you find that community that reflects that back or supports you in that, it's beautiful. You realize nothing is missing. But it's okay to say, I thought it was going to be this way, and it's not, and I have grief about that. Look, it's the same thing when I really realized that, in inverted commas, there was something wrong with Lola. I had a grief there that I had to be with because the perceived future that I had for my child was no longer possible or wasn't going to look that way.
Yeah.
There was pieces of that I had to let go of. Yeah, that I'd already cast forward. So who was I in that? Who was she in that? What was that life going to look like? There's part of us that does do that jump forwards, and it's more about letting go of the fantasy projection and the grief that brings us crashing into, and what we've made that mean about our own identity is more probably where the grief sits than what is actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can see that even with the miscarriage that I had, like so much was really the grief over what I now had to face that I didn't want to face, like the job that I didn't love, you know, and the imagined life, the fantasy life that I was building up in my head that didn't look like that anymore. It wasn't just the baby, right? It was who I was in relationship to the world.
Exactly. And that's the part that's the rite of passage. So I would still say that our 4 processes, allowing it, ritualizing it, supporting your body through it, and sharing it, totally still apply.
Yeah.
So if you would love us to go deeper on any of those topics, we'd love to hear from you. If, beautiful listener, that wasn't quite hitting the nail on the head from you, we'd love to hear how, and we'll take the conversation deeper. And we're super grateful that you wrote into us and invited us into an opportunity to open a conversation that hopefully is healing for many. And Bridgie, what have you got going on in the world? How can we connect with you?
You can find out more about me at bridgetwood.life. At the moment, I'm inviting you into Reimagining Motherhood, which is a liminal space where conscious parent and whole woman can collide. So it's not all about them and it's not all about you. It's this beautiful intersection of growth and opportunity and juiciness that we explore the motherhood journey through. So find out more at bridgetwood.life. And you, Jules?
Is Queen School, which is the full Queen School 4-module course combined with facilitation and holding by me in Honey Club. You can find out more about that at julietenner.love for all things being loved better by becoming a better lover.
Remember to nourish someone, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.